March 9th would have been my 15-year wedding anniversary. And so my boss, I had a prostitution sting going on that day. And so like we're briefing it up. It's just a low level, like, we just had a Craigslist ad and we were gonna have people come in. But somebody knocks on the door and they're like, "Hey man, Brian wants to see you." And I'm like, dang. So I go down the office, and again, there's a lot of trauma going on in my home life. And so I knocked on the door and I didn't know what he wanted. I didn't know if, something's going on. I didn't know if like my ex had called in, we've been arguing and fighting and whatnot. So, you always think the worst. And so like I knock on the door, I was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he's like, "Have a seat." And like anytime the chief tells you have a seat, bro, you're like, I was internally freaking out. Like, what is going on right now? Like, I need you to tell me what's going on. And he looked at me, he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know what today is, right?" Referring to what would have been my 15th wedding anniversary. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm straight, man." He goes, "Well, you got a lot of people out here that are relying on you to make good, critical decisions. And I just want to make sure that you're mentally prepared, because if you're not mentally prepared, you're not physically ready." He said, "You tell me, and I'll comp you out for the day and have somebody else lead the operation." And I looked at him. I said, "Man, I'm straight, bro. I'm good." And what I didn't say was, "Are you okay?" What I didn't say was, "When we get done with this operation, I know today is a bad day for you. Let's go chop it up, man. Let's go have a cold beer together." And 2 hours later, he went home and shot and killed himself. And I was the last one to talk to him. And man, when I tell you my world fell apart with that, and he was everything to me, man. He was like 5'8", like 240, nothing but muscle, cauliflower ear. Man, he was just a bad dude, man. He was the definition of strength, definition of stoic strength. And when he took his life, all of a sudden, man, it was like everybody always told me suicide's weak. Like, you can't let go of that. Like, it's just, that's a weak way out. But at this point, like when Brian had taken his life, all of a sudden it made sense to me. And when I say it made sense, it was a trauma talk. And it wasn't the good talk. It was a trauma talk. And it was saying, it's not suicide, it's a sacrifice. And all of a sudden that sacrifice word kept popping in my head. Sacrifice yourself. And so that whole next week, from March 10th until March 17th, I started making preparations to leave this world. And on March 17th, I woke up on a Saturday morning and I said, all right, today's the day. And I decided that zeros on the clock was when I was going to pull the trigger. So that's how I got to the journey to midnight. And if you want me to keep going, I can keep going into midnight. So I cleaned up my whole apartment because I didn't want people to come over to my crib and see all just, underwear everywhere, this, that, and the other. So I laid out all my accounts, my passwords, I put everything in order. And then I wrote my suicide note. And it was really to my kids. But there's 3 paragraphs, but my first paragraph was to my sons. And I basically said to him, I said, you're not going to understand, I know this, but please understand that I love you more than anything. You're my light in bad times. You're my sunshine every morning. And it goes on for 2 more paragraphs, but really I didn't want to fail them. And I think people can resonate with that because I wanted to sacrifice myself to make sure that I didn't continuously fail my sons. And I felt like when I say sacrifice, like I wanted to make sure, like let's say like my brain's not switched on and I'm not making a good decision. Let's say I pull the trigger in a bad way, or let's say I do something wrong out here in the street. Like my kids are going to suffer from those decisions. And so if I take myself out of the game, I know that their mother's a great mother. I know that she's going to take care of them. And that's really kind of where my mind space was. So I sat in my Yukon, my suicide note, and I got in my car about 10:30 and I just started listening to the music of my life, what reminded me of like good and happy times. And so the journey to midnight was my journey to midnight on March 17th. And it's crazy, Roman, because I got a phone call at 11:13 and the first phone call came in a little bit before that, maybe like 11:12. But my buddy Ben, not the same Ben from the Navy, but a Ben that was a police officer, my best friend, he called the first time, went right to voicemail because my phone was on Do Not Disturb. But he calls right back. He's like, it's St. Patty's Day. Let me do the message. And so he calls back and it breaks through to Do Not Disturb. And it kind of shook me, right? Like, so I'm vibed out with the music going on. I'm preparing myself and everything else. And my resolve is and then also my cell phone music plays. And so I grabbed it and I answered it. And he said, hey man, why don't you come over for a cold one? I said, bro, I can't right now. I said, I got something I got to take care of tonight. I said, but maybe tomorrow. And he said, and I'm gonna tell y'all this. He told me 2 things. He said, Griff, I want to tell you first, I love you. And he's not an I love you person. He like you hug him, he freezes up. He said, I want to tell you that I love you. And number two, I want to tell you that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And as you're going through what you're going through, I want you to know that I'm gonna walk with you. And just those two things right there at 11:13, I was like, okay. And I made the best decision of my life right there. I said, if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. Because there was nothing about March 17th. It was just a nice day, and I was done. Like people were like, oh, it was St. Patty's Day. And no, it was just the next day in my life. And I said, you know what? Today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I got that mentality 20 years prior, man. And so God gave me that lesson 20 years prior to bring me to that blessing of understanding that if today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I pushed my suicide off, and I went over, had a beer with Ben. And on March 18th and on March 19th, I did the same thing. If today's a good day to die, so is tomorrow. And I did that for the better part of about 2 months. And then I changed that mantra to, if today's I didn't need that anymore because I wasn't feeling suicidal. So I changed it to every day I'm going to do something good for myself. And so I would wake up and I start putting my life back together. So I wake up and I'd take care of some financial stuff, or I'd take care of a bill, or I'd read, or I'd go to the gym, or I'd go for a walk, or, I'd do something active, or I start reading a book. And right around like November that year, I decided to change that mantra. And I live with this mantra every single day of my life, including today. And I said, every day that God gives me on this green earth, he gives me 24 more hours. Every day I'm going to find an opportunity to do something good for somebody else. And man, I live by that, and it just makes me feel good. And like, I know this sounds kind of weird to say, but I do it selfishly because I focus on that good. Like here's a perfect example. Like the other day I was driving in New Jersey for one of my full-time job meetings, and I pulled into the gas station, and I was vibed out. I was listening to podcasts or music, whatever. And so I just hopped out to start getting gas. And can't do that in Jersey, bro. So the dude yells at me. He's like, yo, and like it startled me. I was like, oh man, that's right. I'm in Jersey. So he comes over, he pumps the gas, so we start chopping up and talking, and it turned out to be a really nice guy. And I went in my backpack, and I have these little Jesuses that I pass out, man. So I gave him I said, everybody needs a little Jesus in their life. So I gave it to him, and I gave him a challenge coin. And man, we hugged it out, bro. He said, you just made my day. And I said, well, I appreciate that, man. You made my day. And for the next 10, 15 minutes, I thought about how I maybe potentially made his day a little bit better, right? He may have gone home and said to his wife or his child, like, hey, I met this crazy looking bearded dude, man.